I was halfway through scrubbing algae out of my backyard fountain when I saw her, Cheryl Sanderson, the self-declared queen of the HOA, marching across my lawn like she owned it. She wore her usual oversized sunglasses, clipboard tucked under one arm, and that fake pearl necklace she probably thought screamed, authority. "Walter," she snapped, not even bothering with a hello. "That fountain is a violation. It draws mosquitoes. I've had multiple complaints." I looked up from the stone basin, soaking wet and annoyed. "Funny. No standing water and I clean it weekly." I installed a pump to keep it circulating. "The only thing this fountain attracts is compliments." Cheryl's lips tightened. "I'm going to have to write you up. That fountain doesn't match the community aesthetic." Page 24 in the bylaws. "The bylaws you rewrote without a community vote?" I shot back. She flinched like I'd slapped her. "Excuse me. You heard me. I've got the old version and the one you revised. I've been comparing them. Your version added 32 new rules." "That's called progress, Walter," she huffed, spinning around in her orthopedic sandals and stomping back toward the sidewalk. I didn't think too much of it until 2 days later I woke up and nearly slipped on the patio. My fountain was overflowing with bubbles. Thick, foamy white suds poured down the sides like it had been possessed by a soap demon. I stood there blinking, trying to process what I was seeing. Then the scent hit me, lavender dish soap. Someone had dumped a whole bottle into it. I checked my security camera footage, heart pounding. And there she was. At 2 a.m. in a bathrobe and slippers, Cheryl freaking Sanderson tiptoeing across my lawn like a raccoon and pouring a jug of soap into my fountain. Then she strutted off like she'd just delivered justice. I stared at the screen, stunned. That was it. I'd had enough of her petty power trips and HOA bullying. She wanted war? Fine. I was done playing nice. By noon, the fountain was drained, cleaned, and back to normal. But I wasn't. I'd spent the morning combing through my local municipal code, talking to a retired city inspector I knew from my days in contracting, and reviewing the footage frame by frame to make sure there was no doubt. Cheryl Sanderson had trespassed and vandalized private property. And in my state, that wasn't just a slap on the wrist offense, it was criminal mischief. I printed stills from the footage, clear enough to see the label on the soap bottle. Then I filed a police report. The officer, a younger guy named Delgado, took one look at the pictures and raised his eyebrows. "She's the HOA president?" he asked, flipping through the photos. "For now," I said, "but I've got a feeling that's about to change." He nodded. "This is clear-cut. She entered your property without permission and caused damage. That's criminal trespass and vandalism. You pressing charges?" "Absolutely." Delgado filed the report, took a copy of my video, and said they'd follow up. I was expecting a drawn-out process, maybe a warning or a fine. What I didn't expect was for Cheryl to double down. The very next day, I came home from work and found a bright orange notice duct taped to my front door. Notice of violation, unapproved water feature. Remove within 72 hours to avoid fines. There was no envelope, no date issued, and no HOA signature. Just her initials at the bottom. My neighbor, Curtis, a retired Air Force mechanic, saw me tearing it down and walked over from his driveway. "She tried that on me 3 months back," he said. "Claimed my garage paint didn't match the color harmony standards. I checked, there's no such rule." "She made it up. Why didn't you push back?" "I did. Took it to the board. But Cheryl's got 3 of her buddies voting with her. They shut me down." That explained a lot. Cheryl wasn't running the HOA, she was stacking it. I asked Curtis if he still had that fake violation. He did. I told him to hang on to it. I spent that evening knocking on doors. I wasn't interested in a witch hunt. I just wanted the truth. By nightfall, I had statements from 9 neighbors who'd received bogus citations in the last year. Invented rules, threats of fines, and in one case, a lien warning for a decorative birdhouse. I compiled everything: photos, witness accounts, old and new bylaws, and scheduled a meeting with a real estate attorney. Her name was Dana Bristow, and she dealt with more rogue HOAs than most people knew existed. She flipped through my folder, her expression unreadable. Then she said, "You've got enough here for a civil suit. But do you want to go that route? or hit her where it hurts. What's that mean? HOAs are non-profit corporations. That means they're subject to corporate governance laws. If she's altering bylaws without a vote, issuing false violations, and using her position to retaliate against homeowners, that's abuse of power. You can file a petition for removal. But first, we go public. Dana helped me draft a formal complaint and submit it to the county. Then we arranged a special HOA meeting. According to the original bylaws, which I still had in my garage, any homeowner could call one with signatures from 10% of the community. I collected double that in 2 days. The night of the meeting, the community rec center was packed. Cheryl walked in late, wearing a tailored pantsuit like she was running for office. She saw me standing at the front with Dana and froze. "What is this?" she asked, clutching her clipboard like a shield. Dana didn't blink. "Ms. Sanderson, we're here to address misconduct allegations and propose a vote of no confidence." "You can't do that without board approval," she snapped. "Actually," Dana said, lifting the original bylaws, "we can. This community was never properly notified of the amendments. That makes them invalid. All actions taken under them are subject to reversal." That sparked a murmur through the crowd. Someone in the back said, "Wait, seriously?" Another asked, "So all those fines are bogus?" Cheryl's face turned blotchy. "These people don't understand the administrative burden I've carried. I've sacrificed my time to maintain standards." Curtis stood up. "You mean bullying people over flower pots and paint samples?" Another voice chimed in, Hannah from 2 streets over. "You told me I couldn't hang a flag on my porch. My husband's a Marine." Dana raised a hand. "Let's stay civil. This meeting is about facts." She handed out copies of the police report, including the stills of Cheryl vandalizing my property. Gasps echoed across the room. One man stood up, arms crossed. "She did that and still tried to fine him?" Cheryl's voice cracked. "This is a smear campaign. Fabricated footage. I won't be disrespected like this." Delgado entered the room then, in full uniform. He walked straight to Cheryl. "Ms. Sanderson, you've been formally charged with misdemeanor vandalism and criminal trespass. You'll need to come with me." The silence was deafening. Cheryl's jaw dropped. "You can't arrest me at a community meeting." "You're not being arrested," Delgado said calmly. "You're being served. You'll receive a court date. Refusal to comply will escalate things." She snatched the papers, trembling. "This is all lies." Dana turned to the crowd. "We're not here to humiliate anyone, but enough is enough. This community deserves transparency and fairness. If you agree, we'll initiate a vote to remove the current president." The result wasn't even close. Out of 62 homeowners present, 57 voted to remove Cheryl Sanderson from her role. The remaining 5 abstained. Not a single vote to keep her. After the vote, Dana recommended appointing an interim board made up of neutral homeowners people like Curtis and Hannah until a full election could be held. The crowd agreed. Cheryl stormed out without another word, her clipboard forgotten on the folding table. I stayed behind to help clean up. Curtis clapped me on the back. "You know, I thought we'd have to live under her thumb forever." "Not anymore," I said. "She underestimated how much people pay attention when you mess with the wrong one." The next day, I received a handwritten apology from the new interim board. They waived all previous citations and confirmed the fountain was fully compliant. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from the county clerk. Cheryl had pleaded no contest to the charges. She paid a fine, agreed to community service, and by court order was banned from holding any HOA position for 5 years. The community started changing after that. The new board hosted monthly potlucks, invited input on neighborhood projects, and even formed a volunteer group to help elderly residents with yard work. And as for the fountain, it's still running strong. Circulating clean water, no suds in sight. Some people plant flags to stake a claim. Me? I cleaned out a fountain, caught a crook, and gave my neighborhood its voice back. A week after the vote that removed Cheryl from power, our neighborhood felt like it had been let out of a pressure cooker. Lawn chairs started popping up on porches again. People who used to avoid eye contact were stopping to chat during walks. The mood had shifted, but not everyone was thrilled about it. 3 streets over, a guy named Dennis McCall, Cheryl's closest ally on the former board, had been lying low since her removal. He hadn't attended the vote, but on Thursday morning, 2 unmarked envelopes were slipped into mailboxes on my street. No postage, just tucked in by hand. One landed in mine. Inside was a typed letter accusing the new interim board of illegitimate seizure of power, claiming that residents had been manipulated by outside legal counsel and warning that legal action may be pursued to restore proper order. I walked it straight to Hannah's place. She read the letter once, then looked up. So now Dennis thinks he's the savior of the HOA? Looks that way, I said. He's trying to stir up doubt. Probably hoping if he can discredit Dana or the vote, he can wrangle his way back onto the board. Hannah folded the letter and set it on her counter. He's grasping. Everyone saw the footage. No one's crawling back to that mess. But I wasn't so sure. Dennis had been the one who handled the HOA's finances, and no one, not even Dana, had seen a full accounting of the dues collected over the past 2 years. That was Cheryl's blind spot. She liked control, but she hated numbers. Dennis handled the budget, and I was starting to wonder just how clean his hands were. That weekend, I asked Curtis to help me review the old meeting minutes. We met in his garage, surrounded by shelves of meticulously labeled toolboxes and a rusted but well-maintained Triumph motorcycle. These are all from the last 3 years, he said, handing me a milk crate of binders. I kept them after Cheryl stopped publishing them online. And nobody noticed? She said the HOA was going paperless. Most folks didn't care enough to check. I flipped through the pages. The formatting was inconsistent. Some entries were typed, others handwritten. Line items varied wildly. 1 month showed a landscaping expense of $400. The next listed nearly $4,000 with no explanation. There were no receipts, no contractor names, and no audit trails. Curtis, I said, this isn't a budget. It's a guessing game. We flagged every suspicious expense and brought the whole crate to Dana. She reviewed it alongside an accountant she knew who specialized in nonprofit audits. Within 48 hours, they confirmed what we feared, over $32,000 in unexplained withdrawals. Most of it under ambiguous labels like community improvement and miscellaneous maintenance. Dana set down the last binder and looked at me. If these were HOA funds, she said, and no official contractor invoices exist, it's embezzlement. And if Dennis was the sole signer on the HOA account, which he was, we've got a felony. That night, I called Officer Delgado. He met us at Dana's office, reviewed the audit summary, and made a few calls. 2 days later, a detective from the county's white-collar crime division showed up to collect evidence. They subpoenaed the HOA's bank records. Dennis never saw it coming. By the following week, he was in handcuffs outside his house in a wrinkled golf shirt and socks with sandals. The neighborhood gathered quietly, watching from doorways and behind shrubs as officers loaded boxes of documents and a desktop computer into an unmarked SUV. I stood across the street, arms folded. Dennis glanced my way, face drained of color, and stepped into the back of the cruiser without a word. Later that evening, Dana called me. They found personal Amazon charges, cash withdrawals, and even hotel stays. All paid through the HOA account. I nodded slowly. So this wasn't just bad bookkeeping. No, she said. This was fraud. And it didn't start last month, it goes back over a year. Curtis joined me the next morning to break the news to the rest of the interim board. We met in the park near the community center under the shade of a twisted pine tree. The mood was tense but focused. So what happens now? Hannah asked. We let the legal system do its job, I said. But we also make sure this never happens again. We agreed to hire an independent firm to audit the HOA annually. All board meetings would be recorded and posted online. Any changes to the bylaws would require a 2/3 majority vote from all homeowners, not just the board. Dana helped us draft the new transparency rules, and we mailed every household a plain language copy. A month later, the community held its first official election in years. No more silent ballots slipped under doors. We had a proper vote held in the rec center, with candidates giving speeches and answering questions. Curtis ran and won by a landslide. So did Hannah. I declined to run, but I agreed to serve as part of the Oversight Committee, our new accountability layer to prevent abuse of power. Dennis was indicted on 3 felony counts of embezzlement and 2 misdemeanors for misappropriation of funds. He tried to claim it was all a misunderstanding, but the evidence was airtight. The court ordered full restitution and barred him from holding any fiduciary position in a nonprofit for 10 years. Cheryl, meanwhile, had packed up and moved out quietly. Her house sold to a young couple with a rescue greyhound and a taste for wind chimes. They painted the shutters a bright teal, something Cheryl would have had a fit over. Now everyone complimented it. The fountain in my backyard kept running through it all. Sometimes I'd sit beside it in the evening, listening to the water and the occasional rustle of neighbors chatting across driveways. It had started as just a personal project, something to bring a little calm to my yard. But in the end, it became the stone that cracked open the dam. Not because of the bubbles, or the soap, or even the vandalism, but because it forced us to look closer, to ask questions we hadn't dared to ask before. And once we did, we found more than we bargained for. We found a community ready to stand up, to fix what was broken, and to make sure no one ever held that kind of unchecked power again. That's the thing about corruption, it hides in the routines, the paperwork, the shrugged-off rules. But shine a light on it, and suddenly it has nowhere to go. We didn't just get rid of a tyrant. We built something better in her place. 2 months after the election, just when the neighborhood had started to settle into a new rhythm, I got a knock on my door that made my stomach twist. It was a man in his 60s, wiry build, leather satchel slung over one shoulder. His dress shirt was neatly pressed, but his eyes were heavy, like he hadn't slept well in days. "You Walter Granger?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah. Can I help you?" He introduced himself as Malcolm Trent. He said he used to be a contractor, specifically the one Cheryl and Dennis had hired for several community projects during their time on the board. "Look," he said, glancing over his shoulder like someone might be watching. "I need to clear my conscience. I saw what happened with Sanderson and McCall. I figured it was only a matter of time before someone started asking about the invoices. I stepped aside and invited him in. He opened his satchel and pulled out a stack of documents. Most were receipts, some were photos before and after shots of minor repairs. Cracked paving stones, a garden fence replacement, a couple of tree removals. None of them matched the totals listed in the HOA's financial records. "You did this work?" I asked. "Some of it," he said, "but never for the amounts listed. They inflated it, sometimes doubled it. I'd invoice for, say, $800, and Dennis would process it as $1,600. Every time, they paid me the correct amount, but the books showed something else entirely." "Did you ask them about it?" "At first, Dennis told me not to worry about it. Said the HOA had a discretionary reserve to pad things for tax purposes. I didn't like it, but they paid on time and never shorted me." Malcolm hesitated, then pulled one final sheet from his folder. This one's different," he said quietly. It was an invoice marked as paid nearly a year ago, $9,000 for emergency structural repair to a non-existent retaining wall behind the tennis court. Malcolm had signed it, but the signature wasn't his. "I never did this job," he said, "and I didn't sign that. I didn't even know they submitted this until I went back through my records after Dennis got arrested. I took a photo of the document and sent it to Dana. She called back within the hour. "That's forgery," she said. "If these were submitted as legitimate HOA expenses, and the contractor didn't authorize them, that's another layer of criminal liability. They didn't just steal money. They fabricated work to cover it." Dana forwarded everything to the county prosecutor. By the end of the week, new charges were filed against Dennis, this time for forgery and fraudulent use of HOA funds. Malcolm was called in to give a full statement, and the investigation widened. But it wasn't just Dennis who had more to answer for. Cheryl had always claimed she wasn't involved in the finances. But her signature appeared on at least 12 project approvals, including the phony invoice. Dana tracked down emails from Cheryl's old HOA email account, ones Dennis never bothered to delete from the server. One of them, dated just weeks before the fabricated invoice, read, "Make sure the contractor gets his cut. We'll take care of the rest on our end." No paper trail. That was enough for the DA. An arrest warrant was issued, and Cheryl was picked up while trying to sell her house. She was charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, falsifying financial records, and aiding in the misappropriation of nonprofit funds. Her bail was set higher than Dennis's had ever been. At the arraignment, she tried to play the victim, claiming she had been misled by Dennis and signed things without reading them closely. But the judge wasn't buying it. "You were the acting president of a nonprofit," he said. "That comes with responsibilities. Negligence is not a defense when thousands of dollars are missing and your name is on every approval slip." Curtis and I attended the first day of the trial. The courtroom was packed with neighbors. Cheryl sat stiffly at the defense table, her posture brittle, her expression unreadable. Dennis looked deflated, like a balloon someone had stepped on. The prosecution laid out everything. The inflated invoices, the forged signatures, the fake retaining wall, the emails. Malcolm testified calmly and clearly, and the jury paid close attention. Then came the testimony from Cheryl, a neighbor who worked for a local landscaping company. She revealed that Cheryl had contacted her husband's business a year ago, asking for blank invoices just for record-keeping. Her husband declined, confused by the request. "She told us it was standard practice for HOA documentation," Cheryl said under oath. "But it didn't feel right." That testimony sealed it. In the end, the jury didn't take long. Cheryl was found guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to 2 years probation, community service, and ordered to pay restitution. Dennis received a slightly stiffer sentence, 6 months in county jail, 5 years probation, and a court-mandated ban from managing any organization's finances. The community gathered at the rec center the weekend after the verdict. Curtis brought a grill, someone else brought folding chairs, and Hannah organized a potluck. It wasn't a celebration exactly, more like a release. The weight had finally lifted. Dana stood up and addressed the crowd. "This neighborhood didn't just survive a corrupt HOA," she said. "You exposed it, you cleaned it out, and you rebuilt it. That doesn't happen everywhere. You should be proud of what you've done." Curtis nodded at me from across the lawn. "She's right," he said. "Not a lot of folks would have stuck their neck out like you did." I shook my head. "All I did was catch someone on camera. The rest, that was all of us." That night, back in my yard, I sat by the fountain for the first time in weeks. The water bubbled gently, lit by the soft glow of the new solar lights I'd installed. No more soap. No more notices. No more tiptoeing tyrants in the middle of the night. The HOA was now run by people who cared about the community, not control. Meetings were open, votes were fair, and finances were posted monthly on a shared drive. And for the first time in years, people actually showed up, not because they were afraid, but because they wanted to. Malcolm ended up joining the oversight committee, bringing his experience to help verify all contracts. Hannah spearheaded a neighborhood improvement grant, and the tennis court, once used as a front for shady expenses, got a real upgrade, this time with proper documentation and community approval. The HOA still existed, but now it served the people instead of ruling over them. And as for me, I kept my fountain running, not as a symbol of victory, but as a quiet reminder. Sometimes the smallest things can bring down the biggest lies. All it takes is someone willing to see things clearly. And a camera that never blinks.